If you like hiking or rock climbing or just being outside, this one's for you. From a mysterious door carved right into the rock to people who went missing, here are some of the most mysterious discoveries made in the mountains. The Rock Tomb. The Rock Tomb of Kapili Kaya is without a doubt a truly mysterious place. It's a massive tomb cut into the face of a mountain. It looks like a doorway that can only be opened by a talented wizard uttering the magic words. It really seems like it was taken straight from the Lord of the Rings. You might even say it looks like something that would have been built by dwarves to keep a dragon away from their precious treasure. Yet this is a real place that you can visit for yourself. The Rock Tomb is located in Turkey, way in the middle of nowhere. It's miles from the nearest city of Çorum, which itself isn't exactly a tourist destination. The landscape is devoid of human life, with the road leading to the tomb little more than dirt and gravel. Somebody put a lot of care and a lot of effort into building the tomb. There is a series of staircases leading up the side of the mountain to the megalithic doorway. It looks like a doorway, but it isn't a doorway. It only looks like one, as you can see in the images. The way inside of the tomb is through this small space on either the left or right of the imposing stone door. In all of its grandeur, the pathways lead to nothing. Behind the enormous facade is a tiny tomb barely big enough for a single person. It's as if the builders gave up or ran out of funding. And of course, it's so old that whatever or whoever was initially placed in the tomb is long gone. There is no evidence left. It's difficult to date, but most experts agree the Rock Tomb of Kapili Kaya was constructed in the 2nd century BC. No one knows who made it. There is only one strange clue inside. It's a mysterious inscription that says Ikesios. Some people say this may have been the name of a Greek commander. Some say the Greeks, others say the Romans made it. It's a lasting mystery that archaeologists so far haven't been able to solve. The future of this monument is bleak since there are no measures to protect it. Apparently, people hang out there and leave graffiti. There is a hole about 1 meter high, big enough for a small person to crawl through. So, if you're up for an adventure, go ahead and visit the Rock Tomb. Advanced architecture of Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is by far the most incredible mountaintop city anywhere in the world. It's remote and rises high above the clouds, making you feel like you're in heaven itself, or at least one with nature and the gods of the Inca. The mystery is that nobody can say for sure what Machu Picchu was for. The ancient city can be found high in the mountains northwest of Cusco in Peru. It may have been a sacred religious site, but maybe not. One of the strongest theories currently on the table is that Machu Picchu was a royal estate. It wasn't somewhere you'd find markets and everyday Inca. It was where a select group of elite Inca lived and ruled over the peasants and the surrounding valleys and foothills. It may have also been a religious sanctuary for the higher class. Machu Picchu may have been a kind of Vatican situation. It could have been a religious city where only the top members of Inca society were allowed to visit freely. The site stretches 5 miles across the mountaintops, featuring over 3,000 stone steps and amazing examples of engineering techniques. Prior to the year 1450, the Inca built most of the structures at Machu Picchu with such amazing precision that you could hardly fit a sheet of paper between the boulders. After 1450, their architectural style changed. They began building their temples and houses with spaces between the boulders. It was a huge difference from the previously seamless joining the Inca are famous for. So what changed? The Inca were always making advancements in science. In 1450, it's believed an earthquake rocked the city. A new report from the Geological, Mining, and Metallurgical Institute of Peru identified traces of a 6.5 magnitude earthquake in the 15th century. It deformed many of the walls at Machu Picchu, forcing the Inca to look at things from a new perspective. They began to practice seismic-resistant architecture. The discovery proves the Inca were at the forefront of engineering. The Inca made several modifications to their architecture to make them more earthquake-resistant. The windows were in the shape of trapezoids and tilted inward from the bottom to the top. They stopped using mortar and made dry stone walls that could move slightly and resettle without the walls collapsing. This incredible architecture was one of the aspects that made the Inca so advanced. I want to give a big thank you to a mysterious user called user UW5, etc., and Kurt for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries. Fortified Mountain City. A fortified city that stood proudly 800 years ago is currently crumbling on a Chinese mountaintop. Diaoyu City has been worn down by time, the elements, and multiple invaders. It's a sad shadow of its former self. Still, the ruins are sprawling. Excavations have been going on here for nearly 20 years. Every season, archaeologists uncover more and more of the vast city like a shining stronghold in the sky. Soldiers used to stand vigilant in cliffside outposts. Chinese royalty and government officials lived in luxury within the walls of the palace. It was a truly secure fortress, protected from every angle except down. Diaoyu City came to an end when invaders burrowed beneath its walls like termites and attacked. This city was built specifically to be a defensive stronghold. It was erected in the early 13th century and fell before the century was finished. In 1259, a Mongol army showed up and decimated the Chinese defenders. The Chinese soldiers held off the invasion for as long as they could, thinking they were invincible up in their high city. But the Mongols tunneled beneath it and made their walls useless. It was part of the Grand Mongol strategy to control all of China. After the city fell, it was abandoned. Then it was neglected for 8 centuries. Only over the last 2 decades have archaeologists been trying to reconstruct the history here. Recent excavations have unearthed the ruins of the imperial palace. The Chinese Academy of Social Sciences said the palace was at the highest point in the city. It was a massive building with a pavilion surrounded by smaller structures. Going down from the city were at least 7 massive terraces, each one its own district. The coolest recent discovery was the underground tunnel. Archaeologists have finally unearthed the physical tunnel carved out by the Mongol soldiers when they launched their attack. Archaeologists pulled out over 80 pieces of explosive firearms from within the tunnel. They believe these artifacts are the oldest evidence of explosive firearms anywhere in the world. Mystery in the Bosnian Mountains. In July of 1944, 12 bombers with the Royal Air Force were sent from Italy to attack an oil refinery in Serbia. One of them did not return. Nothing was ever heard from the crew on board the aircraft, and it was assumed it was shot down in action. It's a mystery that has survived for 80 years without any clues. But now, the chance discovery made by a hiker on a remote mountain may have cracked the case. Europe is most famously known for its Alps. That's including the Italian, French, and Swiss Alps. But there are many other mountains, such as the incredibly dangerous mountain ranges of Bosnia and Herzegovina. During World War II, these mountains proved just as dangerous to Allied aircraft as enemy pilots. Thousands of planes and aircrew went missing during the brutal fighting, remembered today at an enormous memorial in Malta. There is a single gravestone to share among the 5-man crew of Flight HF-736. Dzena Dzino is a Bosnian photographer and hiking enthusiast who was exploring the treacherous mountains of his homeland when he stumbled across human bones. Not just human bones, but also some seriously old airplane wreckage. The human remains and twisted metal are on the highest mountain in the region, Zrnica, which stands a whopping 7,300 feet high. This discovery was just made in September of 2023. It's only a couple months old, so none of the remains have been confirmed as belonging to the lost crew from Flight HF-736. However, the plane wreckage is indeed from a Wellington bomber with a crew of 5. It's almost certainly the lost plane. It must have crashed in the mountains trying to escape enemy territory. The Bolshoi Tjak skulls. A very strange and very suspicious story appeared in January 2016. Across several websites and on social media, reports detailed a pair of creepy skulls found in the Caucasian mountains of Russia. The skulls look human at first, but when inspected closer, they are clearly not. They appear to be the skulls of either aliens or ancient humanoid monsters. These skulls are currently housed at a small museum in the Republic of Adygia, not far from the Black Sea. It's called the Belovode Museum, run by Vladimir Balakov. If you ever happen to be in this part of Russia, you can see the museum for yourself. It's a real place full of interesting relics, like fossils and Nazi artifacts. The owner is believed to have found a preserved cache of Nazi memorabilia, hence his impressive collection. But what about the skulls? According to Vladimir, the skulls were found inside a cave by a pair of hikers in the 2010s. One of the skulls has a hole at the bottom where it would have been attached to a spine. It definitely belonged to a creature that walked on two legs, but it's missing the cranial vault seen with human skulls. It also doesn't have any jaws. It has extra large eye sockets and bizarre extensions that look like horn nubs. The proprietor of the museum has supposedly sent the pictures to paleontologists. Nobody has been able to explain what creature they belong to, though. The two skulls are extremely unusual and appear to belong to nothing currently known to science. They obviously aren't human, yet they don't seem to be the skulls of beasts. One of the most exciting theories is that they belonged to an ancient race of reptilian humanoids, but as you can imagine, that's a theory that has proved impossible to confirm. What kind of creature do you think they belong to? Or do you think they're nothing but fakes? Let me know in the comments below. The landslide. Usually a landslide is bad news. A landslide can wipe your house off the side of a mountain and bury your couch under hundreds of tons of soggy dirt. But in Spain, a landslide helped uncover amazing treasure from 2,500 years ago. The landslide occurred in the mountainous region of northern Spain. At the end of summer 2023, a series of fires broke out in the countryside. They caused a small landslide, which shifted the soil enough to expose what must have been a lost treasure hoard. First, a worker discovered a piece of a golden necklace. Then, archaeologists got involved, showing up with their metal detectors. Soon, they found parts of a second necklace. Both pieces of jewelry were created around the year 500 BC. They've already been connected to the Iron Age Celts who dominated Iberia before Spain or Portugal were countries. Prehistoric archaeologist Pablo Arias believes the gold necklaces were likely part of a buried hoard of fabulous treasure. They would have been buried in a pit inside a box with other tantalizing goods. Where the rest of the stuff is, though, that's a bit of a mystery. The landslide did some serious damage, so archaeologists haven't found the rest of the loot yet. The whole mountainside could be littered with ancient pieces of gold forged by goldsmiths who lived 500 years before the Roman Empire. Watermelon snow. In 2023, the mountains in Utah started turning pink and red. Locals were shocked to find snow on the ground tinged with red and pinkish hues. It looked really pretty, but nobody understood what it was. According to experts, it's a natural phenomenon known as watermelon snow. It's a normal occurrence that appears in various mountain regions across the globe. What causes mountains to suddenly be peppered with watermelon-colored snow? It's not what you might think. The coloring has nothing to do with the snow itself. Rather, scientists at Utah State University claim watermelon snow is the result of a green algae bloom during cold weather. You can thank the species of algae called Chlamydomonas nivalis for the display of color. The algae, which lives on snow and ice, turns frozen precipitation into a variety of brilliant colors, from orange to green to purple. But it doesn't happen every time it snows. The algae only blooms when there's plenty of meltwater within the snowpack filled with nutrients. The algae stirs from dormancy and suddenly, sometimes only for a few hours, the mountains look like they've been painted watermelon flavor. People got to see this phenomenon in Utah this year in June. By the time the snow was ready to melt, the algae had turned the last layers into watermelon bubblegum. The ancient sea monster. Evidence of a sea monster has been found 9,000 feet above the sea. A truly gigantic leviathan that lived 205 million years ago was discovered by scientists in the Swiss Alps. How in the world did it get on top of a mountain? The team of archaeologists behind the discovery are with the University of Zurich. The fossils they dug from one of the highest peaks in Europe belong to an ichthyosaur. During the late Triassic, ichthyosaurs were tremendous monstrosities. They were like a mix between a crocodile and a dolphin, only a lot more formidable than both. They ruled the seas and shores surrounding Pangaea. The supercontinent was dominated by terrestrial beasts, while its coastline was patrolled by savage reptilians. How big of a creature was it? Well, try to picture a mutant crocodile about the same size as a whale. It was enormous. This marine titan grew up to 65 feet long and weighed an astounding 80 tons. Archaeologists found fossils from 3 individuals, including pieces of vertebrae, shattered teeth, and fragments of rib. According to team member Dr. Heinz Furrer, the specimens include the longest ichthyosaur ever discovered and the thickest ichthyosaur tooth ever found. Who would have thought the most impressive specimen of one of the most impressive sea monsters would be at the top of a mountain? The reason the fossils of this sea beast were so high is that it died at the exact place where 2 tectonic plates collided. Millions of years ago, tectonic plates smashed into one another with unbelievable force. This caused the seabed to be pushed up. What used to be at the bottom of the ocean was suddenly being forced into the sky. It took millions of years for this process to finish, and now you and I get to see the end result. The Swiss Alps were formed from that collision, and that's why so many amazing marine specimens can be found in the mountains.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Caves of Baja. In India, there is an expressway that connects the cities of Pune and Mumbai. It's traveled by hundreds of people every day, just as it has been for 2,000 years. This modern expressway began as an ancient road beaten into the dirt. Nearby is a group of 22 caves carved out of the rock, dating back to the 2nd century BC. These temples inside caves are now what remains of an ancient Buddhist society. One of the most iconic pieces of this old trade road is the Bor Ghat, a passage carved through the mountain that allowed swift travel to the Konkan coast for merchants and caravans. The caves carved throughout the mountain pass were made by those travelers and merchants carrying goods to coastal ports. At first, everyone thought these caves were built by monks who wanted to isolate themselves from the outside world. But a historian realized that these cave complexes were always along trade routes, so it made more sense for the merchants to pay for the caves for the monks, and then they would always have a protected place to stay. The monks had a large prayer hall with 27 pillars and wooden beams on the ceiling they put up over 2,000 years ago that's still there today. It was a pretty dangerous journey for merchants to take, always in danger of being attacked by wild animals or bands of thieves. By paying for the construction and upkeep of dozens of cave monasteries, the merchants believed they would be granted safe passage. Later on, a fort was built above the monastery caves to protect the monks and the strategic pass. Mesa Verde and the Cliff People. Mesa Verde is arguably the most mysterious archaeological location anywhere above the Mexican border. But this isn't just one site. The Mesa Verde National Park boasts over 4,700 archaeological sites, including upwards of 600 ancient cliff dwellings that were constructed by the ancestral Puebloans between 550 AD and 1300 AD. They lived in the cliffs and canyons of the Four Corners region of the United States for 700 years, flourishing as an advanced culture unparalleled anywhere in the area. But the reason the people of Mesa Verde are such a mystery is that one day, for seemingly no reason, they picked up and left. In the 1200s, over the course of a single generation, every last person living in the expansive cliff dwellings left their ancestral home behind and fled. To this day, historians and archaeologists have no idea where they went or why they abandoned their homes. Their best guess is that people began migrating into New Mexico and Arizona, and possibly even deeper into Mexico because of severe drought. But why they would abandon such an impressive kingdom is really unknown. Their cliff dwellings were truly great feats of engineering. Some of them had up to 150 rooms and space for farming carved beneath the overhanging cliffs. Even today, their ruins are still amazing and visited by many every year. Have you ever been here? Let me know in the comments below. Mycenaean Palace of Kydonia. Ancient Kydonia on the island of Crete was the seat of power for the Minoan civilization, which of course prospered even before the Greeks came along. It is an archaeological site of great significance and confusion. The confusion comes because of a child's skeleton that was discovered with evidence of knife wounds, suggesting the child had been cannibalized. However, Recent interpretations have revealed something so shocking that the events could probably be turned into a dramatic series. The ancient Minoans practiced sacrifice. It didn't happen very often, but it was something they would do when their civilization came under hard times. In general, they would sacrifice a young virgin to appease whichever gods they were worshipping at the time. The bones of the young girl found at the palace in Kydonia are proof of this type of barbaric behavior. After significant research, dating the bones, and interpreting what had happened back in the 13th century BC, archaeologists were able to figure out why the child had been sacrificed. First, there was a great disaster, an earthquake that probably had a magnitude of between 6.5 and 7.5. It destroyed much of the Minoans' capital on the island of Crete. Of course, they assumed the earthquake was the result of an angry god, so they removed parts of the palace floor, sacrificed a virgin, 43 sheep, 4 pigs, and an ox to appease whatever deity was angry with them. Thousands of years later, archaeologists found all of these bones hidden underneath the ruins of the palace. Lost imperial home. Near the small city of Nara in Japan, the impossibly massive ruins of an old imperial house have recently been uncovered. It's one of the largest ruins to be excavated in Japan in recent years. It was found at the old site of the Heijo Kaiyo Palace, in what was once the old capital of Japan. Not everything has been excavated here just yet, but what archaeologists say is that what they have found was probably the centerpiece of the residence where the rulers of Japan lived during the 8th century. One of the experts believes the building was probably the residence for Empress Koken, who ruled from between 718 and 770. She was at the forefront of what is known as the Nara period, from 710 to 784. So far, archaeologists have only managed to reveal a single building supported by pillars. This was Empress Koken's living space. She was the 48th monarch of Japan, involved in an affair with a high priest named Dokyo. Dokyo was appointed grand minister and then later priestly emperor. When Empress Koken died in 770, he tried to ascend the throne himself, but that didn't go so well. And shortly after, Nara was abandoned as the capital. What's really interesting is that Empress Koken wasn't even the first female ruler of Japan. She was the 6th, and this was back in the 700s, over 1,300 years ago. There were 2 more women who would become the empress before the men got together and quashed female rulers once and for all in Japan. The Labyrinth of the Colosseum. The Colosseum in Rome is one of the most iconic pieces of architecture anywhere on the planet. But this ancient wonder is just as fascinating below as it is from the outside. Beneath the floor of the Colosseum is a labyrinth, which was hidden beneath a wooden floor for the 500 years that the arena was used in blood combat. Starting in 80 AD, the labyrinth was used for all kinds of behind-the-scenes action. But nobody knew what action this was until just recently, when a German archaeologist deciphered the intricacies of the labyrinth after studying it for 14 years. The conclusion was that the labyrinth was used frequently for animals. For example, workmen would raise cages with bears, lions, or even leopards from the labyrinth up into the Colosseum, where gladiators and slaves would be forced to fight them for the joy of the spectators. But here's something you probably don't know. After the glory of Rome came to an abrupt end, the meaning of the Colosseum was gradually lost. Throughout the following centuries, the labyrinth beneath the floor of the amphitheater was used by vagrants. The Colosseum itself became populated by blacksmiths and glue makers. The residents of Rome began believing in local legends about what the Colosseum had once been used for. Nobody even knew it had been for gladiator battles. They thought it was an old temple dedicated to the sun. It even ended up being the preferred location for necromancers, who went to the Colosseum at night to try and summon demons. In the 16th century, the Pope even tried to turn the Colosseum into a wool factory. Big shout out to Jana Highway and Rovo B. Thanks so much to both of you for watching and supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe for more videos about archaeology and amazing discoveries. Muraygat Dolmen Site. The site of Muraygat in Jordan is one of mystery and intrigue. The site consists of over 100 stone monoliths spread throughout the countryside in the absolute middle of nowhere. Some call it the Jordanian Stonehenge. It's a unique site for many reasons, and scientists are still trying to figure out what it was used for. Here, archaeologists have discovered ancient cultic buildings, stone megaliths called dolmens, kind of like Stonehenge, and traces of ancient settlements. This is all a bit strange because in the ancient world, places of ritual importance were not usually constructed near settlements at all. Standing stones were more religious centers, and you wouldn't really have dwellings nearby. These were often places of great magic and rituals and were found far from civilization. In this case, Suzanne Kerner, the director of excavations for the site, says that the rock structures may have been used as burial sites. There are about 122 dolmens in the desert here, with some consisting of a small entrance, a floor of stone, 2 walls of stone, and a capstone for a ceiling. Buried underneath the rock are undoubtedly the remains of the dead. All the different features of the landscape here were created during the earliest part of the Bronze Age, around 5,000 years ago. The structures, the stones, the dolmens, and the entire site may have had something to do with burials, perhaps even a cult of the dead. Ancient knife. Colonial Mackinac is one of the most interesting archaeological sites in the United States. Just recently, an excavation at this ancient Michigan fortress turned up a new piece of treasure. While digging deep in an old cellar, archaeologists found a very old and very worn pocket knife that, if you didn't know any better, looks like a chicken nugget. According to the curator of archaeology for Mackinac State Historic Parks, the exact age of the knife is unknown, but the clasp knife, as it is known, can hopefully be restored to its former glory. But the knife is only the most recent in a long string of interesting archaeological discoveries at the Colonial Fort in Mackinac City, an old settlement from the 18th century that is slowly being reconstructed. This was one of the first places in Michigan to be inhabited by settlers. Back in the 18th century, it was more of a trading village for furs, occupied by Native American tribes, and later on the French. The exact history of the site isn't totally known, but archaeologists have been working for over 6 decades to uncover its secrets. So far, they've excavated about 1 million artifacts here. Included among the finds are brass sleeve buttons from 1769, a lead seal from 1717, and even a structural post from the original fort in 1715. Ancient ritual site in Mexico. A new ritual site has been uncovered in Mexico that is 8,000 years old. Archaeologists were shocked to discover this bizarre archaeological wonder in the state of Nuevo León. It had probably been built by the first people to settle Mexico and to interact with Ice Age animals that were going extinct, even as the settlers first started building their own villages. Here's what was found at the site: teeth, bones, skulls, and other scraps of animals such as mammoths, llamas, giant bison, and much more. Experts are saying the animals were probably used in unknown rituals by the first community in Mexico. Almost nothing remained of whatever structure had been built here, though there was obvious evidence that some rectangular stone pieces had been erected as part of a rocky shelter. This is the reason the site was named La Bóveda by archaeologists, otherwise known as the vault. Unfortunately, the archaeological site is so old that other than bones and a few pieces of stone, nothing else has been found. Archaeologists can't even guess at what kind of rituals were conducted by these ancient people, or what gods they may have worshipped. Sunken shipwreck. A new archaeological site has been located in a rather unusual place. At the bottom of the sea, off the coast of Greece, underwater archaeologists found an ancient shipwreck with a hoard of treasures. The ship crashed near the Greek island of Kossos sometime in the 3rd century AD. It's not clear how the vessel ended up sinking. There were actually 4 of them found very close together, suggesting it was a treacherous area for seafarers back during that time. However, the other ships were dated back over millennia, between the 5th century BC and modern times, so the area has pretty much always been dangerous. There were all kinds of treasures found in the shipwrecks, scattered across the sea floor. It was mostly Roman pottery, a type of container called amphorae. These things were used to hold precious olive oil and wine. Archaeologists discovered amphorae filled with oil that had been produced in several different places, including both Spain and Africa. It was probably being transported back to Greece or even as far as Asia when disaster struck. New theory of the Nazca Lines. The Nazca Lines in Peru are nothing short of fascinating. These huge geoglyphs were etched into the desert ground thousands of years ago, and ever since their discovery in modern times, they have been the source of great mystery. New information and studies are being released all the time. Some claim the lines were part of an ancient labyrinth. Some say they were designed to mimic the constellations, and some others even say the lines trace the route of a subterranean water system. According to new research, scientists say the Nazca lines may have been used like a map to direct ancient people to temple sites across the area. The first lines were probably used to mark the route which pilgrims would take to reach the temples where they worshipped their old gods. However, researchers also say that the purpose of the lines may have changed as generations went by, and that they were probably used by several different groups of people for different things. There are a lot more geoglyphs here than people realize. Between the Andes Mountains and the coast, spread across the desert, there are at least 1,000 geoglyphs created between the years 200 BC and 600 AD. Besides straight lines in the dirt, there are also weird creatures and normal animals like dogs and monkeys. Some of these supernatural beings are so odd that scientists haven't been able to identify them. What's really strange is that if the lines really do lead to ancient temple sites, they haven't actually been discovered. It's possible the temples could have been destroyed or simply deteriorated as time went by. Right now, scientists are still trying to make the theory work. The face of Machu Picchu. The 15th century Inca citadel, famously known as Machu Picchu, was built on a mountain range 7,970 feet high. Experts believe that the site was constructed around 1450 as an estate for the Emperor Pachacuti, who lived from 1418 to about 1471. Machu Picchu was abandoned just a century after it was created at the hands of Spanish conquistadors. Oddly, however, it was not known to the outside world until centuries later, when American historian Hiram Bingham drew widespread attention to it in 1911. Some people have noticed that when they turn the famous photograph of Machu Picchu that is commonly used in postcards, they can see the profile of a man's face. The formation is entirely natural, but bears an uncanny resemblance to a person looking toward the sky. With all the knowledge the ancients had of the stars and of the sky, did they perhaps choose this site specifically because of this? Did they observe this site and perhaps see the face of the mountain as a sign? Anyone who wants to snap their own original photo of the face of Machu Picchu can do so from a structure known as the Guardian's House. While some visitors believe that the Inca had help from someone or something else to build Machu Picchu, it's much more likely that they did this on their own, taking into account the location and the environment. It's a magical place for a reason. Machu Picchu is also home to a rock formation known as the Sleeping Woman, which depicts the side profile of a female who appears to be in a peaceful slumber. Some archaeologists even believe the Sleeping Woman may have once been covered in gold based on samples taken from the site. The man's face in the mountain and the sleeping woman most likely played a role in the Inca mythology. The Swallowing Mountain. At 8,504 feet high, Mount Nyangani is Zimbabwe's tallest peak. According to local folklore, it's both a sacred place and a place where a vindictive spirit resides. Either way, it should be approached with caution if you are even able to get there. Numerous people have died on the mountain, with some getting lost and falling down steep cliffs or ravines, and others succumbing to accidents that seem to happen after a mysterious fog and strong gusts of wind appear out of nowhere. People are also known to suddenly become confused and disoriented for no apparent reason while navigating their way up and down the mountain. Many hikers just disappear, and their bodies are never found. Legend goes that if you are hiking and pass by a brick of gold or a smoldering clay pot with no fire, to simply keep walking as if you didn't see anything. Don't be tempted to pick up the gold or see whose pot that is. Additionally, hikers are encouraged to seek the permission of local elders before attempting to traverse the mountain. Oddly, during the early 1980s, a park ranger became lost on Mount Nyangani for 4 days, but appeared perfectly healthy when he was finally rescued. Last year, a pair of 8-year-old twin boys died while trying to help their father recover stray cattle on the mountain. They got caught in the throes of a torrential downpour, causing the pair to get lost. A search party found the twins and their father unconscious. Sadly, the young boys succumbed to their injuries. While park staff were quick to blame the weather for the tragedy, no logical or scientific explanation has been proposed for the many strange and tragic occurrences on this cryptic peak, leaving many to wonder what strange forces are really at play. Dyatlov Pass Incident. This incident is perhaps the most famous adventure mystery ever. A group of 9 hikers consisting of 7 men and 2 women died in early 1959 near a peak known as Dead Mountain in Russia's Ural Mountains. They had set up camp at the base of the mountain as an intense blizzard approached, and their journey ended there. They were supposed to report back but never did, so a search party went out to look for them. Over the course of the following months, their dead bodies were found scattered throughout the area, with some wearing only their socks and underwear. Several of the corpses had cracked skulls and bones, and some were even missing their eyes. One was missing her tongue. Their tent, which still contained their belongings, had been slashed open from the inside. Were they attacked by a creature? Did they perhaps come across some secret government project they weren't supposed to see? The official cause of death was hypothermia, but the circumstances and evidence was so bizarre, it's hard to imagine what actually happened here. There have been many investigations into the incident, and journalist Natalia Barcegova, who has been publishing articles on the case, says that every person who starts researching it thinks he's the one who can solve it, but the deeper he goes, the more the swamp sucks him in. The Russians are obsessed with the incident and are constantly trying to solve this Soviet mystery. The uncertainty gave way to many conspiracy theories, from government agencies, the abominable snowman, and everything in between, but there were no solid leads. Just this year, a groundbreaking study proposed that an avalanche hit the group out of nowhere, forcing them to flee and then killing them. Lead study author Johan Gom made it clear that the researchers were not claiming to have solved the mystery, but to suggest that an avalanche is a plausible theory. Critics argue there were no signs of an avalanche at the site, but the team that conducted the most recent study recreated the conditions in a digital avalanche model and found that it was entirely possible. But as the researchers conceded, there are no definitive answers about the 9 hikers' fates, and it seems like there may never be. A lost city. In 2016, an international team of Greek and Swedish archaeologists discovered the remains of a lost city on top of a hill in the Thessalian Plains, 190 miles north of Athens. The 2,500-year-old settlement is mostly buried underground, which is why it went unnoticed for so long. Researchers were exploring a town called Vlokos when they came across ancient ruins consisting of towers, walls, and city gates that were previously written off as unimportant. Upon closer examination, they realized that the site was once a thriving metropolis, measuring over 99 acres within the confines of its walls, according to a statement from team leader Robin Runland. Additionally, the team found coins and pottery, which helped them date the city to 500 BC. Runland explained that the settlement appears to have flourished during the 4th to 3rd century BC and was subsequently abandoned for unknown reasons. Maybe they were conquered by the Romans. There are no plans to excavate, but instead use advanced imaging technology to look beneath the ground surface and take a closer look. World's oldest mattress. Starting around 77,000 years ago, entire families slept together on a bed of evergreens inside a rock shelter nestled in a sandstone cliff, known as the Sibudu Cave in South Africa. The practice continued for an estimated 39,000 years, according to experts, who revealed in a 2011 study that they had discovered the world's oldest known bedding inside the cave. The oldest leafy mattresses at the site predate other known bedding by 50,000 years, study leader told National Geographic. After digging 9.8 feet deep, the team of scientists found compacted layers of fossil plants that were periodically burned, possibly to reduce pests and garbage. The ancient people who used the bedding even created a top sheet with insect-repelling greenery, perhaps representing the first known use of medicinal plants. Widely explained that the prehistoric cave dwellers likely used the leaves to combat body lice, although it was unlikely they encountered bedbugs. They had other bugs to worry about. The mattresses were about a foot thick, big enough to sleep an entire family, and were both comfortable and long-lasting. Everyone all in one bed was great during ancient times, warm and safe, just like today. World War II era skeleton. While lost near a lake situated 12,000 feet above sea level, 2 hikers discovered a human skeleton wearing a belt and leather shoes. They were near California's second highest peak, Mount Williamson, in 2019. Luckily, they were able to get help. The Inyo County Sheriff's Department was initially baffled by the find, which they couldn't immediately connect to any missing person cases. Using DNA technology, they identified the individual as Gichi Matsumura, a Japanese-American artist and Manzanar internment camp prisoner who died during a freak snowstorm in 1945. Matsumura had traveled into the mountains with a group of fishermen and separated from them at some point to paint a watercolor, but then the blizzard set in, forcing him to retreat to a cave. His body was found a month later, and a burial was performed by members of the camp and Matsumura's family. And although the collective memory of his grave faded over time, the man's granddaughter, Lori Matsumura, was surprised when authorities called her and told her they may have found his remains. Lori had known about the burial since childhood and had even seen photos of it, but she had never asked much about her grandfather's time at Manzanar, and the rediscovery of his body made her wish she had. Untersberg Mountain disappearances. Situated Located along the border between Germany and Austria, Untersberg Mountain is the site of numerous unexplained disappearances and reappearances. It is rumored to be inhabited by demons, spirits, and strange creatures. One thing that seems to happen a lot is that people will have a feeling of missing time or traveling many miles in just a few minutes, which makes people think there is some sort of time vortex or alien abduction going on. Over the years, hundreds of people have vanished without a trace. One of the most famous cases at Untersberg Mountain involved a trio of explorers who entered the mountain's cave system and went missing in 1987. Park rangers discovered their car, but no trace of the vanished hikers. 3 months later, the three individuals called their families from a ship on the Red Sea, with no idea of how they got there. It seemed as though they had time traveled, leading them to believe that when they entered the caves of Untersberg Mountain, they unknowingly passed through a time portal. An explorer went to go find the time warps for himself, and he reported going into a cave where he found escaped Nazi soldiers that had fled to the mountains, but said that they still looked extremely young, as if time had not passed for them. The stories go all the way back to 1738, when a hunter disappeared. He vanished into thin air, but then 1 year later he appeared at his own memorial service, dazed and confused. He refused to tell anyone what had happened to him, except an archbishop, who was so disturbed by his confession that he resigned and never spoke of it again. While the place is extremely beautiful, these mountains' history of alleged time travel and other bizarre occurrences is undeniable. Strange dinosaur. In 1971, someone discovered the bones of a small, two-legged, plant-eating dinosaur at a remote site in the Skeena mountain range of British Columbia, Canada. Dating back some 70 million years, the fossils were put into storage following their discovery and went more or less unnoticed until 2004, when undergrad student Victoria Arbour was tasked with researching the skeleton for a project. Noticing the bone's remarkably preserved state, Arbour soon determined that the bones represented the most intact dinosaur specimen ever found in British Columbia to date. It was also the first set of dinosaur bones ever found in the Skeena Mountains. She also realized that the specimen may represent a previously unknown species. Arbour explained that while the skeleton resembled two known dinosaur species, the dinosaur's arm bone is very distinct from other dinosaurs that were found at the same time in southern Alberta. In late 2019, the dinosaur, nicknamed Buster, was officially confirmed as a new species. Now Arbour is the curator of paleontology at the Royal BC Museum and received a six-figure grant to continue her research into the region's dinosaurs. Mystery monoliths. Late last year, 3 mysterious monoliths appeared in Utah, California, and Romania, all within the span of a few weeks. The first monolith was spotted in the Utah desert in late November by helicopter crews and wildlife biologists who were counting bighorn sheep in the region from overhead. They spotted something glinting in the distance, which turned out to be an 11-foot-tall stainless steel object, the mirrored surface. Nobody knows who created the monument, and 4 unidentified men were seen dismantling it and walking away with the pieces, reportedly telling an onlooker that they considered it to be trash. Their association with the sculpture, if any, is unknown. Days later, a triangular 13-foot-tall monolith appeared on Batka Domeni Hill in the Romanian town of Piatra Neamț. Then another strange steel structure measuring 10 feet tall sprang up on Pine Mountain in Atascadero, California. Some speculated that the monuments were inspired by a storyline from the science fiction novel 2001: A Space Odyssey, in which a monolith appears on Earth and gives wisdom to a tribe of apes. But a solid explanation was never determined, leaving us to wonder what the heck is going on. As humans, we've just always been obsessed with monoliths. Valley of the Headless Men. While searching for gold among the remote Mackenzie Mountains in the Nahanni Valley of Canada's Northwest Territories in 1908, brothers Willie and Frank McLeod disappeared. Their decapitated bodies were discovered in the area 2 years later, and their heads were nowhere to be found. 9 years later, an explorer named Martin Jorgensen ventured into the Nahanni Valley to look for gold. His cabin mysteriously burned down shortly after he mailed several letters declaring that he had found the precious metal. Jorgensen's burned and beheaded body was found among the ashes. In 1945, the headless remains of a miner from Ontario were found in the man's sleeping bag. The mysteries and alleged hauntings surrounding the Nahanni Valley only increased from there, with numerous people turning up dead or missing, and the region remains steeped in legend to this day. The circumstances surrounding the decapitated men's deaths are still unknown. The Nahanni National Park Reserve is open to the public, but it's not easy to get to. Those who wish to see the creepy but scenic valley for themselves must get there by boat or float plane. The world's oldest bedding. High in South Africa's Lebombo Mountain sits a deep gash in the rock called Border Cave, which contains evidence of human occupancy dating back hundreds of thousands of years, including bones, tools, and preserved plant material. Based on evidence, the cave's occupants likely laid grass bedding on top of ash to repel insects around 200,000 years ago, according to researchers. While excavating Border Cave with her team, archaeologist Lynn Wadley noticed white flecks in the sediment and realized they were plant traces, science reported. Upon closer examination, she identified the preserved plant matter as coming from the Panicoideae family of grasses that grow in the region. Wadley concluded that people intentionally brought the grass into Border Cave based on the quantities her team found it in. Short of having access to a time machine, there's no way for the researchers to know whether or not people slept on the material, but all signs point toward it. They also don't know the exact age of the bedding, which was found in the same layer of earth as two teeth, one which was dated to a little before 200,000 years ago, and the other which was deposited slightly after. If the dates are correct, it means the grass inside the cave likely constitutes the world's oldest known bedding. Untersberg Mountain. Situated along the Germany-Austria border, Untersberg Mountain is the alleged site of hundreds of disappearances. A trio of hikers who entered a cave in the mountain in 1987 reportedly vanished and was never seen again, despite thorough searches for them. The only traces they left behind were their parked cars. 3 months later, the missing friends contacted their families from Alexandria, Egypt, seemingly unaware of how they got there and claiming they must have time traveled once they entered Untersberg Mountain. They returned home to Munich with completely changed stories, claiming that they deliberately abandoned their vehicles near the mountain, took a train all the way to Yugoslavia, panicked because they didn't have their passports, and then boarded a ship in the Red Sea. It sounds more like a hangover type of situation. While this story seems implausible, it's arguably harder to believe that the individuals might have actually time traveled. But the missing persons legends revolving around Untersberg Mountain date back to 1738, when a hunter named Michael Hulzager vanished, yet showed up to his own memorial service exactly 1 year later. Even stranger yet, a wedding party supposedly reemerged in the condition they disappeared in a century later. Reliable information about these cases is scarce, leaving you to wonder if the legends about people going missing at this mountain are true, and at the same time, they can't exactly be ruled out yet. The Snarly Yow. A large, spooky black dog known as the Snarly Yow has been spotted roaming through the mountains of West Virginia and Maryland. Sightings of the creepy canine possibly date as far back as the early 18th century, when the first Germans settled in West Virginia's Upper Potomac Valley. The first definitive sighting of the Snarly Yow happened in 1790 at a nearby inn, where the dog appeared out of nowhere, frightened horses, causing them to throw their riders off, and disappeared back into the night. Eyewitness accounts of the Snarly Yow vary, with one report claiming the dog's coat changes between black and white, and another observer saying that they saw a white, headless canine dragging a chain. As time passed and technology advanced, the Snarly Yow began chasing cars, and the sightings continued. He reportedly looks so lifelike that drivers allegedly often believe they've hit him, only to exit their vehicle and watch the dog bare his teeth and flee. The Snow Saddle. Any seasoned conspiracy theorist or Google Earth fanatic knows that certain parts of the world are less visible than others on the program, and some are even blacked out. A large area of a 22,251-foot-high mountain in the Nepalese Himalayas called Kangtiga Peak, also known as the Snow Saddle, is one such example of a place being partially blacked out. The concealed area near the mountain's peak led to speculation that a secret entrance to an underground UFO base was being hidden. A UFO hunter going by the moniker Mexico Geek was one of the first to point out the suspicious image in a YouTube video several years ago. Naturally, others with an imagination at least as large as his quickly caught on and began exchanging ideas for why part of the Snow Saddle is blocked from view. Those who were less quick to buy into far-flung theories suggested that perhaps the big black blotch was simply a glitch. Meanwhile, the Daily Star reported in early 2016 that part of Kangtiga Peak is blacked out due to disputes between Nepal and China, although the publication didn't elaborate on what those alleged disagreements are about. Ancient Zapotec Settlement. In July of this year, archaeologists announced the discovery of an ancient pre-Hispanic settlement atop the Cerro de Peña in Mexico's Puebla state. Dating back over 1,500 years, the ruins are situated at a strategic location on the mountain that sits 6,000 feet above sea level. Residents of a nearby village originally discovered the settlement, which archaeologists believe dates back to the 6th century and may have been dedicated to the god of the underworld based on carvings at the site. During its heyday, there were 7 pyramids, a ceremonial area, and a ball court. Researchers are still trying to determine who built the settlement, but they believe it was constructed by the Zapotecs, a society that originated around 2,500 years ago. Nicknamed the Cloud People, the indigenous civilization possessed a sophisticated writing style, as well as advanced engineering and architecture. They dwelled primarily in the southern highlands of central Mesoamerica and traded with other major societies of the day, including the Olmec, Maya, and the Teotihuacanos. The Zapotecs mostly disappeared during the 16th century, most likely at the hands of Spanish invaders, as well as the diseases they brought over with them from Europe. But the society was not completely eradicated, and today around 7 Zapotec languages and hundreds of dialects, as well as other customs and cultural elements, survive. Lady of Mali. A gigantic stone formation bearing an uncanny resemblance to a woman's face sits at the top of Mount Laura, situated near the borders of Senegal and Mali. Known as the Lady of Mali or the White Lady of Africa, the face was reportedly discovered in 1997 by Angelo Pittoni, an Italian self-proclaimed geologist with questionable credentials. Pittoni noticed the structure while searching for diamonds in the area and immediately concluded that it was man-made. He said that the woman seemingly had Caucasian facial features, which differ markedly from the facial features of the local African population. The eccentric man decided that the carving was somehow associated with Atlantis, the so-called lost civilization which most respected scholars believe never existed. Based on the belief that Atlantis was real, Pittoni theorized that after the mythical island sank into the ocean, survivors sought refuge in West Africa. The general consensus among the scientific community is that while the stone formation may resemble a face, this is merely a coincidence, as the structure is entirely naturally occurring. Sediment at the site was dated back somewhere between 5,000 and 25,000 years, leaving even more unanswered questions, or perhaps speaking to the likelihood that the Lady of Mali is not man-made after all. What do you think? Did someone carve this, or is it naturally occurring? Someone has to go there and see. Dueyo. A terrifying wolf-like creature known as Dueyo or Deweyo is said to roam the woods of Maryland, where numerous reported sightings have occurred since someone first spotted the creature in 1944. Standing at around 6 feet tall, Dueyo is covered entirely with fur and has a bushy tail and a dog-like nose. He walks on 2 feet like a human, but looks and behaves like a wild animal, with shaken eyewitnesses recounting his growling and frightful screams. The first ever known sighting of Dueyo did not become widely reported until 1965, nearly 2 decades later, when the story appeared in a local publication called the Frederick News Post. For the next several weeks, calls and letters flooded into the press from people claiming to have seen the Dueyo for themselves at some point before. Most witnesses described him as a large, brown, hairy creature with oddly shaped legs and a strange walk. While it's easy to write off seemingly outlandish claims like these as someone's imagination getting the better of them, or someone pulling some sort of publicity stunt, some witnesses seemed credible. Take, for instance, an incident in the Cunningham Falls area, where 2 park rangers reported seeing a large, hairy creature running on 2 legs. Alleged sightings continued into the late 1970s, but these claims eventually fizzled, suggesting that the Dueyo had left the area, or that people simply became bored with the legend. The creature survives today in local folklore, but nobody seems to have spotted him in quite some time. The Berwyn Incident. During the night of January 23, 1974, in what became known as the Welsh Roswell or Roswelsh incident, locals heard 2 unexplainable massive bangs and saw a bright flash of light over the Berwyn Mountains in northeast Wales, near the quiet mountainside villages of Llandrillo, Serwyn, and Bala. Sorry, you know I'm bad at Welsh. Houses shook, and when terrified residents looked outside, they saw what looked like a fireball falling from high in the sky. A search and rescue team sprang into action, hurriedly ascending the mountainside, only to discover no wreckage, no evidence of a horrible wreck. The Royal Air Force even got involved, but their efforts also turned up nothing. In the absence of a tragic accident, locals were left to wonder what had just happened. At a loss for explanations, many turned to the supernatural, wondering if they had witnessed a UFO crash. The British Ministry of Defense adamantly disputed these claims, despite numerous confirmed sightings of strange objects in the sky throughout Britain on the same night the bizarre explosion occurred. An official investigation into the incident concluded that residents of Landrillo had experienced a tremor, which explains the loud noises they heard. Thereafter, a meteor just happened to be falling from the sky, burning up entirely before hitting the ground and therefore leaving no impact crater. Some of the witnesses, as well as many people who did not experience the event firsthand, do not buy this explanation and are thoroughly convinced that the area received an extraterrestrial of some sort that strange night. But the authorities refuse to budge on their stance that a series of unlikely natural phenomena are to blame for the alarming noises and sights. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more mysterious stories. See you next time! Bye!